Hey everyone, Rob from Southgate Media Group here. Before we get started with this podcast, we have a quick message. If this is your first time checking out the show, we love that you found us and we really hope you enjoy it. What we have to say is for the subscribers. If you enjoy our shows, would you please donate to help keep these going? We don't want to have to put traditional ads on these shows, but this does cost money. So we really do rely heavily on donations. To make a donation to the show, please go to our website, www.southgatemediagroup.com. Go to the page for the show, and in the upper right-hand corner is a donate button. It takes you right to PayPal, and you can donate whatever amount you want. Thanks a lot for listening, everybody. And now, on with the show.
Give me sight beyond sight.
Greetings, Starfighter. You are about to listen to the totally super awesome 80's Reboot Overdrive podcast. Always remember, no matter where you go, there you are. Ready Player One.
Goonies never say die. I'm not a Goonie. I want to go home. I forgot. But still, don't you realize? The next time you see Sky, it'll be over another town. The next time you take a test, it'll be in some other school. Our parents, they want the best of stuff for us. But right now they gotta do what's right for them. 'Cause it's their time. Their time. Up there. Down here, it's our time. It's our time down here. That's all over the second we ride up Troy's bucket.
All right, hello, this is Dave, and on the show today I've got Rob Southgate. Say hi, Rob.
Hi there, how you doing?
And we got very special guest, James Kahn, who is a writer of many great movie novelizations of the 80s, some of them including Return of the Jedi, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, Poltergeist 1 and 2, and also our beloved Goonies. Welcome to the show, James.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So, James, I'd like to get started. I want to find out, how did you get started? How did you get started writing?
I've been writing actually since I was 9, although, for the first 10 or 15 years, I was just writing for myself. Nobody else really cared. Writing short stories. I used to rewrite comic books that I used to read, Tales from the Crypt and Amazing Stories, and change the storylines around and change the endings, which I guess is actually kind of the first novelization that I ever did in a way, although, as I say, I didn't do it for anybody particular. The way I got started writing novelizations was by going to medical school, and then I became an emergency room doctor. I was working in an ER in Los Angeles, in Santa Monica, actually, and we got a call from Kathleen Kennedy, whose name I didn't know at the time, asking if we could help her figure out how to resuscitate an alien. So, we said, yeah, we think we could do that. So she came down to the ER with Melissa Matheson, who is the screenwriter on E.T., and we staged a little resuscitation scene for them. I played the part of the victim, who I was soon to find out was the E.T. the extraterrestrial, and a friend of mine pounded on my chest, and we went through the whole drill, and they liked it. So they invited us all down to the set of E.T., which was filming at Laird Studios next to MGM. And, we got to meet Steven, and they decided to dress us all up in hazmat suits.
And so you're in E.T.?
Yeah, I was actually pounding on the little fella's chest.
Oh, that's fantastic!
Isn't that great?
I'm on screen for maybe 1 or 2 nanoseconds. If you blink, you'll miss me, but you can't really tell anyway because we're all in these hazmat suits and helmets. I run in holding a clipboard, and then I'm standing at the bedside, and we're all basically all the dialogue in that scene is just ad-libbed jargon that all of us who are either emergency room doctors or nurses just threw in the way we would if we were actually running a resuscitation. He hasn't got a femoral pulse, give me another amp of bicarb, all that kind of thing. So while I was there, and that was really exciting, and I'd always wanted to be in the movies, and I I had written science fiction novels before that, or at least one original novel called World Enough and Time, which was published by Del Rey. It was the first book in a trilogy. So while I was on the set, I got to know Stephen a little bit, and I gave him my book, World Enough and Time, and said, by the way, would you like to make a movie out of this? I figured I wouldn't have a chance like that again. So he said he was a little busy at the time, but he passed it on to his other producer, Frank Marshall, who read enough of it to decide to assign me the novelization of Poltergeist, which at that time was in post-production.
Wow.
But the deal was I had to write it in less than a month because they were behind the 8 ball and they'd already had production problems. So I got all my friends to cover all my shifts in the ER for the next month and just sat in Stephen's office at MGM and wrote night and day. Wrote longhand, actually. I didn't have a computer at that time. So they also hired a secretary who would come in the afternoons, and I would give her all of the longhand pages that I'd written, and she would type it on her typewriter and turn it in.
Now, I want to interject here for two reasons. This is why I was so excited to talk to you. I knew the name immediately when it came across because literally sitting on my nightstand upstairs, I took a picture immediately when your name came across. I have your Return of the Jedi book.
Oh, nice.
There.
Nice.
And as soon as he said James Kahn, I thought of that, and then I went, I read, I think, all of your adaptations repeatedly back in high school. And Poltergeist, I think I read it 3 times before I saw the movie.
Wow.
I was enthralled, and your book was such an integral part to my, we'll call it geeking. I mean, the thing that really made me what I am was your books, and that Poltergeist book, man. It was just, I couldn't stop. I loved it. I loved how you wrote it. I loved the story, and it really it changed what I was seeing on screen.
Wow.
So there you go. That's why I'm just so excited to talk to you, James.
Well, thank you. That's great. He actually, Stephen gave me sort of carte blanche to write what I wanted. So I used the screenplay as a kind of basic skeleton script to do the arc of the movie. But then I went back and did a rewrite, fleshing it out with about almost as much material again that wasn't in the movie or wasn't in the script at all, and much of which was taken from my own research in ESP that I had done in medical school.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I loved it. I loved that you did flesh it out so much, and I think that's what attracted me to it so much. The other novelizations that I had read at that point, the few that I had come across, were straight up, like, they watched the movie, they wrote down the dialogue, they wrote down what was happening.
Right.
And then I read Poltergeist, and I was so enthralled. And then when I saw the movie, there was stuff not there, and it just, I exploded. I had to read the book again. So wonderful
cool.
work, James.
Great, thank you.
So is that how that works? Is they give you the script, and then they just kind of give you a carte blanche, just add what you feel like adding, or do you have to run things past like the director?
Well, it depends on who you're doing it for. When I did it for Spielberg, he pretty much, partly because he liked what I did with Poltergeist so much. For the other ones, he gave me pretty much free rein. So, for example, in Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, I added a whole new chapter that was just about Short Round because I liked his character so well. And I wanted to give him a little backstory and a little more depth to find out who he was. And actually I titled that chapter A Boy's Life, which was the original working title of E.T., so it was sort of a secret homage to Spielberg as well.
It's funny because until this moment, I thought that chapter was something that was just cut out of the film. Like, to me, that is part of the story. So that's really interesting.
That's great. That's great. Good to hear.
Now, I have a question. I'm sorry to monopolize, Dave. I'll back off. I tend to talk a lot.
It's okay, Rob. It's okay.
I have not read World Enough and Time. That series. Now, has anything happened with that? I mean, I've never heard of it, and it looks fantastic. I mean, I'm going to run right out and pick up whatever copies I can find. But is that something that has gone on? Is there a fan base for that? Do you find that people talk about that, or is that kind of? Yeah,
there was a kind of small cult following back in the day when it was first released. That was also in the 80s, and that was 3 novels: World Enough and Time, Time's Dark Laughter, and Timefall. And then right around that time, my career sort of took a big left turn into television. And so, I had been just seeing myself as a novelist, and suddenly I started rising higher and higher in the TV racket.
Sure.
And that pretty much took up all my time for, 20 years. So I kind of left that whole world behind me. Since then, just in the last year or two, I've re-released all three of those books with a much smaller publisher, Premier Press, Fast Pencil Premier Press. So it's available, on Fast Pencil's website and on Amazon and on my website as well.
Fantastic. Well, they're going to get my money.
Oh, good. Glad to hear it.
So James, I wanted to talk quite a bit about Goonies, actually.
Sure.
How did that come to you?
Well, after Poltergeist, the next one was Jedi, and that happened for two reasons. One was when Return of the Jedi was sort of in its gestation and just starting to film. George Lucas asked his publisher, Judy Lynn Del Rey, for a recommendation for someone to write the novelization. And she happened to be my publisher for my series that I was just talking about. So she recommended me, and then, of course, I got a great second recommendation from Spielberg and Frank Marshall because of the great job I had done on Poltergeist. So on that basis, I got hired to do Jedi. And once I had done those two, Poltergeist and Jedi, for a while I became kind of the go-to guy for the Spielberg Lucas collaborations or either one of theirs. So Goonies was in there, and Indy was in there as well. I actually had to. I'm really sorry in retrospect, but I had to turn down the novelization of Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade because by that point I had gotten pretty involved in television, and I was head writer on a show called Family Medical Center that was just working me to the bone, and I didn't have any time for novelizations at that point.
Oh, that would have been a good one to be involved in, too.
Yeah, I'm really sorry I missed that.
So with Goonies, that was a Richard Donner film,
Right.
but the story was by Steven Spielberg. So were you collaborating with Steven, or were you getting cues from Richard?
Actually, I only met Richard once, and it was after the film had already shot, and they were in post-production. So I was talking to Spielberg a bit, but he was involved in directing another film at that point, and I can't remember which one. So my point person primarily was Frank Marshall, who in those days produced all of Steven's films, Frank and Kathleen Kennedy.
Right. Really important to Spielberg at that point. Sure.
Both of them were. And then, of course, now at this point, Kathleen Kennedy has gone on to take over Lucasfilms.
Right. She's kind of gone on to something.
Yeah.
Just a little thing.
Just a little thing.
Little thing called The Force Awakens.
Exactly.
Who's heard of that?
Yeah.
Exactly, right. So, according to the blog, you were actually spending a little time on the ship, the pirate ship. So, One-Eye Willie's ship, you were, just soaking it in then.
I did. That was great. I didn't actually get to see a cut of the film while I was writing it. I got a lot of production stills, and then since the sets were still up, and I think they were still shooting a little bit of tails and pickups and things like that, the ship was still there, so I got to. It was sitting in about 3 feet of water on a soundstage on the Warner lot, and it was built to, I believe, 7/8 scale. I don't know why they didn't make it fully scale if they had gone as high as 7/8, but whatever the reasons
Cost
were.
more money, probably, right?
Probably, yeah. And 7/8 was sufficient because it was mostly kids who were going to be on it. So it was great. It was just a fabulous ship to walk around, and every boy's dream. I think, in fact, the very first ever story I can remember as a 3-year-old was my parents got me a 78 record of Treasure Island. It was Basil Rathbone narrating Treasure Island, and it was like a 20-minute, books on tape, except it was books on vinyl. On one side, the other side was Peter and the Wolf, also narrated by Basil Rathbone. But I remember Treasure Island so well, and that stuck to me as like one of the most influential books in my life, I think. So being able to actually go onto a pirate ship now and to write this thing was really a special treat for me.
So you get to relive a childhood memory of being a pirate.
Very deep memory, yeah.
Yeah, nice. Very cool. So did you actually write on the ship?
Write as in WRITE as opposed
Yes.
to write? Yes.
Yes.
I took notes, yeah.
Okay.
In those days, I was still doing all my writing with a pen and a yellow legal pad. So I took both with me and just sat there and absorbed it and took visual notes. It was great.
That's very cool. So is there anything that you put in the book that you wish would have been in the film?
Most of the stuff I added in the book. First, let me say I read Huckleberry Finn just a week before I wrote it as a way to inspire me to sort of into the idea of a kid's adventure.
Sure.
And Huckleberry Finn was another one of my favorite books. And that actually was what decided me to write the book in the first person. So, the first line of the book is, "So my name is Mikey Walsh." The whole thing is told from this kid's point of view. Because, again, I felt like Treasure Island was Jim Hawkins' point of view and Huckleberry Finn was Huck's point of view. So I wanted to give this the same feel. So that was part of it that I brought to it. The rest was primarily, I don't think I brought any extra plot. It was primarily character stuff, trying to get into, who these Goonies were, why each of them was an outcast or felt like an outcast or was an outcast in their own particular way. Data was like the first geek, and Chunk was this, kind of overweight kid that always is outcast in every schoolyard society. And I made him Jewish as well, because I was growing up, I was the only Jewish kid in a non-Jewish neighborhood, so I felt outcast in that way. So I added that little piece of personality to Chunk that I don't think was in the movie.
Interesting.
So, I brought to each of them some little piece of outcastness and Gooniesness.
Gooniesness. I love it. That's definitely a new word there.
So did you, for a short time, feel like you were doing novelizations just for Jonathan K. Kwan? Because he was short round, he was Data. It seems like that was kind of your niche. Like you were hoping he'd have this huge career. My whole career would be based on this.
It was my niche because it was Spielberg's niche. It was
right. That's a better niche.
Yeah, Spielberg just loved him, fell in love with him, and was using him right and left. And I don't know why he dropped off the radar, what that story was.
I don't either. I really enjoyed him in those films.
Yeah.
He's great. He's great in Data.
Yeah. He brought a real kid's energy to it. It was really fun. Yeah. Real enthusiasm.
Yeah. Well, I was going to jump to something else here. You said you went into TV, and I know that you ended up. Now, I don't know, were you writing or you did producing also? You were a producer on a couple of the Star Trek series, correct? Yeah. In television, movies are a director's medium, but television is really a writer's medium. And pretty much all producers in television, when you see a TV show produced by, they're all also writers, and they started out as young writers who just worked their way up in the business. And as a writer, you start out as, what's called a story editor. It's just a low-level writer. You kind of are apprenticed, and you get to sit in on the story meetings, and you're generally assigned one script in a season. And then if you stick with it, you rise through the ranks, and each credit rise basically is associated with more and more producing responsibilities. So, after a while, you get to sit in on casting sessions on the shows that you write. And then after a while, you get to run the casting sessions. And after a while, you get to run the writer's room for the script that you're going to write. And you actually do casting, and you get to direct the directors and tell them what the tone of the episode's going to be about. So I started out as a young writer on a sitcom actually called ER. It was a Norman Lear sitcom back in the day, also in the 80s. That's when everything started for me, I guess. That one had Elliot Gould, right?
Exactly. It was Elliot Gould as an ER doc, and Mary McDonald was the other ER doc.
Believe it or not, it's the only ER show I ever watched, believe it or not.
Well, what's particularly funny is that I created a role for a character called Ace the Orderly that was played by a very young George Clooney. So that was actually the first ER that he played in.
So you gave him his first ER credit. That's something.
Exactly. So it went from there. That show was canceled after 1 year. But then writers travel sort of laterally back and forth between different shows, rising a little each time. So each time I got on a show called Medicine Ball. I did eventually I got to Melrose Place, where I really started rising in the producer chain of food chain, and ended up being co-executive producer on that. And then I was a supervising producer on Star Trek, where I also wrote 4 episodes on Star Trek Voyager.
Now, is that how you came to work on Tech War? Was there, like, because of the Star Trek thing, you kind of got in that Shatner circle and you ended up with Tech War?
No, I was actually a whole different sort of chain of events. I was on 2 shows with showrunners named Hans Beimler and Richard Manning, who were doing things for USA Cable. It was a cable station back in the day.
Yeah,
and
right.
The first one was called Beyond Reality, and that was a show with Sherry Belafonte.
Oh my gosh, I remember that show.
Really, really. And that was on for a couple seasons. That was kind of a pre-X-Files, supernatural ghost hunters kind of thing.
Kind of reminds me of like Warehouse 13. It was that
Yeah,
kind
very
of a
much,
thing.
very much. And she played a PhD professor of supernaturology or something. It was
Yeah.
It was actually the hardest buy on that show. I always thought was not that there were supernatural things going on, but that she was a PhD professor.
Right.
Although she was just a wonderful person, really nice, and it's terrific to work with her.
Sure.
But that went for a couple seasons, and then the same whole writing producing team kind of stayed together because Shatner got his show picked up by the same cable company, by USA Cable, and by the CBC, which was the Canadian Broadcasting Company. I think that was through rebates having to do with Shatner being Canadian. But in any case, I kind of came along with the whole package of writers and producers onto his show at that time.
Yeah, that was a show when that happened. I thought, I had read the books, and I thought, there's something here. This could end up being a big show, especially on like a USA.
Yeah,
and it lasted a little while.
It did, and I thought it was a pretty good show actually, but it got canceled after a season or 2, if I recall. There were about 26 shows, I think, and I can't remember if they did it as 1 season or 2 seasons.
Yeah, I remember I watched them all. I just don't remember what happened.
Right. And I don't know why it was canceled. Presumably because of ratings, but I don't know. It's always kind of mysterious about why a show gets canceled. Sometimes
right.
It's ratings. Sometimes it has to do with contract disputes in the major players.
So what was it like writing for Star Trek: The Next Generation?
I didn't do a lot with that one. I sold a couple story ideas, and then I wrote a script that got rewritten, and it never really went much farther than that until Michael Piller, who liked the little work that I did on that show, was sort of involved in calling me back to really write and produce on Voyager.
Let me see. And I lost my page. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well, I didn't mean to take you off of the Goonies. I know you wanted to kind of focus on that, Dave, but there are just so many things I wanted to ask about. Now, you, as well,
as we were going over all the little outcast pieces of all of them, I just remembered my favorite little extra thing that probably went past most people was that at the very end, the sort of postscript to the book, I mentioned that Chunk's parents adopted Sloth and had him bar mitzvahed. I thought that was...
Oh, that's fantastic. That's fun, man.
That should have been in the movie.
Well, I wonder if they'll do something with that, because there's always this rumor about a sequel. I wonder if they'll take any of that source material from your ideas.
I don't know if that's happening or not. There's been rumors of sequels for many years.
Yeah, we do a show where we cover the geek news called This Week in Geek.
Yeah.
And just recently there was more. It seems like there's forward momentum with that property right now, just like with Ghostbusters, how for years people said it.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, it felt like the momentum shifted, and it actually was happening, and now it is. Goonies kind of has that feel like, this might be it. This might happen.
Cool.
You're like, hey, sign me up for the novelization.
Yeah, no, exactly. I'm ready to go. Who should I call?
Yeah, right. Now, you're also a musician, right?
I am, yeah.
I've neglected to do my homework. I haven't listened yet, but I was reading about it. You deal in kind of Americana.
Yes.
This is my wheelhouse, so I will be checking this out.
Oh, good. Yeah, I've got two CDs out now. One is called Waterline, which is just pure Americana, heartfelt folk songs and a little blues. I did that a few years ago. And then a couple years ago, I came out with one called Man Walks Into a Bar. And that's a concept album where every track on the CD is about one of the characters in this bar on this given night.
Oh, so, fun.
One about the bartender, one about this old barfly, one about the dancer, one about, and so on. And each, the genre of each song reflects the nature of that character. So, one of them is blues, one is country, a couple are folk songs, one is jazz. And that one actually inspired me to write a script, which I've just finished writing, and the script is called Wrong Side Bob, after one of the characters in the bar. And I'm just starting to produce that movie now. I hope to start shooting it in January or February.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
You just cannot go wrong with a name like Wrong Side Bob.
I know.
No, that's a winner.
How can you go wrong? Exactly. I got to know what's up with that guy. And the story, the arc of the story is basically a drifter with amnesia kind of stumbles into this bar searching for his past, and he runs into Wrong Side Bob, who's a guy who's trying to forget his past.
Sounds like a great concept.
So
yeah,
it's the concept, and then all the kind of quirky characters in a bar you might expect get involved.
Fun. That's really cool. I love concept albums. This sounds like a good one.
Yeah.
So now, James, you started out as an ER doctor.
Right.
And you obviously would have missed your calling had somebody not picked you up for ET.
Yes and no. Like I say, I started writing when I was 9 or 10, and I wrote for many years without anybody paying any attention. Although I did sell a couple short stories, one at the end of college and one during medical school. Actually, the first thing I ever sold was I entered a short story in a contest in college, and it didn't win. But one of the judges in the short story contest thought it would be a great story for Playboy. So unbeknownst to me, he sent it into Playboy. And the first I knew about it was I got a check for $3,000 from Playboy magazine for the story they were going to publish.
Oh, wow.
So that was a great intro to being a writing professional. But, that got me into prose fiction. And as I say, I wrote fiction novels which started getting published before I ever got into television or movies. And I think I probably would have gone that route and continued just becoming more and more of a novelist, and that would have ended up being my career if nothing had ever happened in TV.
The novelizations, you talked about being on the ship with Goonies. Is there anything with Return of the Jedi that's one of those scenarios where you got to do something as cool as being able to play on the set or something around those lines?
I didn't. They were still shooting when I got the assignment and when I got the script, and I asked if I could go, but it was such a secret lockdown thing. They sent me production stills to work from for visuals so I could describe who was in it, but beyond that, no. And in fact, it was so secret. This is an interesting story. In the script that I got, that I wrote the novelization from in Return of the Jedi, Luke is the one who actually kills the Emperor at the end. So, and that's how it's written in the script that I got. So that's how I wrote the novelization, that Luke kills the Emperor.
Oh, interesting.
And then I went to see the movie, and Darth Vader kills the Emperor. I was stunned. I thought, how did that happen? So I went back and read the book that had just come out the same day, my book. And in fact, in my book, Vader kills the Emperor.
Oh,
and
they changed it on you.
Yeah. And it was funny, too, because they kept my prose in that paragraph verbatim, everything I'd written, except they just changed Luke's name for Vader's name.
Wow.
So when I saw George afterwards at one of the post-release parties up at Skywalker Ranch, I said, "So George, was that a last-minute decision to make that change?" And he said, "No, I've known for years that Vader was going to kill the Emperor." So I said, "Well, did you just have different versions of the script that you gave to different people so that if someone leaked, you would know who leaked it and no one would know exactly what the real ending was?" And he just smiled and walked away.
I think that was telling right there.
I think so, yeah.
So then your version of it, he Luke was actually lifted the Emperor over and tossed him off the side.
Yeah, just
Yeah.
the way it was
Okay.
in the movie, except it was Luke. Luke grabs the Emperor from behind, and lightning is shooting from the Emperor's hands and going into Darth Vader, and Luke tosses him into the chasm.
Now, James, did you get to keep that script, or did you have to give it back?
No, I have that script. It's
Oh, you're kidding.
carried it around with me all these years, yeah, with all my little scribbled longhand notes in the margins.
Well, when you decide to throw it out, if you could just send me a note, I'll come and garbage pick it, because that sounds incredible.
I have a couple other little fascinating details about it, but they've asked me not to reveal that until I reveal it for the first time in the Star Wars Insider in a couple months. So,
Oh, fun. Okay.
so keep your eyes open for that.
Well, we'll consider what you just told us a scoop. We'll go with that.
Okay, good enough.
80s Reboot exclusive.
Right.
All right, so anything with Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom? Anything like that?
I tell you, I always loved my first paragraph in that novelization, and in general, I spend a lot of time, usually my whole first day of writing, just writing the first paragraph, because I want to get that just right in terms of tone and prose, and I want it to be something that really draws the reader in. So I think that was true in the Jedi book as well, and it was certainly true in Goonies. But of all of them, I think I remember liking the first paragraph of the Temple of Doom best.
Well, I told you for me it was Poltergeist. Even though I read them all, that Poltergeist one over and over. And I actually think I liked your book, Poltergeist 2, more than I liked the film.
Yeah. Now, that one didn't have anything to do with Spielberg. That was the screenwriters, Mark Victor and Michael Grace, retained the rights to that sequel. So they liked the job I'd done on one, so they brought me in to do number 2.
Yeah, and it's not that I didn't like the film. It's just I remember reading the book and going, oh my gosh, like this just blew me away. And then I saw the movie and I was like, hey, it's great, but let's talk about the book.
Yeah,
You know?
and that was another one where I brought a lot of my own stuff in that wasn't in the film, in the script.
And you'd always felt that one was a little bit underappreciated, Poltergeist 2?
I think so, yeah. I mean, it's hard for me to say, and you know, I don't. Obviously, it didn't do nearly as well at the box office, but you know, I thought it was a good film and a good book.
Yeah, it had that really wonderfully creepy, the pastor guy that would come to the door.
Yeah.
To me, that's one of those images that has always stuck with me. He was fantastic. Now, I can't say that about Poltergeist 3. That one was a little rough.
I actually have to say I never saw that one. I'm sorry.
Well, you're lucky. Now, what about the new one? Are you going to see the new one?
I am going to see it. I was told they had decided not to do a novelization. I looked into it, actually.
Oh, that would have been great if you did the novelization.
I know. But
that's not really a thing now as much.
I know it isn't. It's kind of had its day.
Although I will tell you, I met the guy who writes the books. Boy, I wish I had his name at my fingertips here. The guy who writes the Walking Dead books, not the comics, but the books, The Road to the Governor and that. Right. And it's a similar idea. He said that it's not that he's writing a novelization, but he has all this access. They basically he knows Kirkman now, and he's able to like really build worlds in that world. It reminds me of what you did, and I think that's why I'm so attracted to it. It's like, wow, it fleshes things out in a big way.
It's an opportunity to really deepen things and go beyond what a movie can do, and does what a novel is able to do much better than a movie.
Sure.
Now, you mentioned with Goonies that you wrote it as a first person about, from Mikey's perspective. So the scenes that Mikey wasn't in, how did you incorporate that into the story?
Well, as I recall, it's still Mikey relating what one of the other people told him later. Like there's this whole segment in the middle where Chunk has run off. He escaped the basement through the window, and he ran off. He was going to go get the cops. But then he has this whole adventure where he gets re-kidnapped by the Fratelli brothers and brought back and threatened with torture. So Mikey starts that chapter saying, I think, meanwhile, while all this was going on, Chunk told me later that this is what happened to him. And so that he tells it in Chunk's voice. He sort of quotes Chunk verbatim, and I give as I recall, gave Chunk a little bit of his own voice that wasn't quite what Mikey's voice was, but was again in Chunk's first person.
That's what I was worried about. I was worried that, and I'm sorry to say that I haven't read the novelization, but I wanted to make sure that the Chunk dialogue where he's confessing his sins to the Fratellis was in there.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, most definitely. That's a very classic scene.
One of my favorite scenes, yeah.
So if I could go through each one of the characters, could you give like a one or two, like, synopsis of your feel for those characters?
I'll try as much as I
You give it a try, right?
You have to realize I haven't read this book in 20 years either, so
All right, well, I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but Mikey, how would you describe him, like, real quickly?
Yeah, Mikey is like every kid who feels like an outsider. He sort of is every man as a boy. He's a little bit sickly, so he feels like he's one down just from the get-go, and he's teased by his brother. He feels like he's looked down on, and like he hasn't got the kind of physical strength that a hero should have, and yet he wants to be a hero, and he feels like a hero in his own right. And I can't remember exactly where it is anymore, but I remember I had a turning point where, he's trying and he's fighting uphill to get everyone to go along with him on this last adventure, and he's having asthmatic problems. But at some point, he takes control as the leader, and he is the hero, and people do follow him. And it's kind of like how we all like to feel in our own lives, that maybe we feel a little bit teased or mocked for what we lack in our lives, but we feel like there's something heroic in us, and so that's who Mikey is.
And he's got to give that great speech about Goonies never die.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Kind of rallying the troops, rallying that piece of them that all of them feel like an outcast, but if they stick together, they can do it.
Okay, how about Brand?
Brand, I actually had the least identification with. He's the older brother. He's, kind of looks down on and often beats up on his little brother. But again, there was a nice turning point for him where finally he's protective of his little brother. It's like, I can beat up on him, but nobody else can, kind of attitude. So I like that about him.
Okay. How about Chunk?
Chunk was, again, the sort of the physicalization of the subtext. It's an expression in the Stanislavski method of acting, where you find some physical, as an actor, you find some physical piece of business to do that expresses what's going on inside you. As a creator, you can often find physical attributes to give your characters that express what's really going on inside them. And like I said before, kids who are chunky are often dismissed on the playground and looked down on and treated like trash. It's like, he feels that, he internalizes that, he feels that about himself. And so in his life, he tries to overcome that by being the confabulator, telling great stories about all the things that he really has done, when everyone knows he really hasn't. But it's his way of trying to overcome that stigma that he's got.
That's a great way of putting it. How about Mouth?
When I was a kid, I used to get in trouble in school all the time for being the class comic. I always got sent to the principal because I would be telling jokes or mouthing off or making comments, and so I could really identify with Mouth.
So you brought a little bit of yourself to this character.
Definitely brought some of myself to that, yeah. And I took that with me through the rest of my life. Starting out with this sitcom that I helped write, ER. It's like I've always been I started out as a class clown, and I brought that into the sort of my comic writing.
Kind of the comedic, sarcastic angle.
Yeah.
Okay. How about Andy?
Andy's sort of every adolescent boy's heartthrob.
She is.
Yep.
And I thought I was treading a little bit on thin ice to have Mikey actually cop a feel and kiss her, but I ran it by Frank, and he said Frank Marshall, and he said go for it. So I thought she was like the turning point in every boy's life. I feel a little bad thinking back on it now, to the extent to which I didn't really give her a modus operandi in and of her. I didn't give her a real engine of her own the way I would today a female character.
Okay, so you give more of a not necessarily a backstory, but more of a motivation.
Right. And again, sort of her behavior was in a way to validate the triumph of the geeks. She throws over her jock rich boyfriend Troy, I think his name was, to hang out with the Goonies, to really align herself with the Goonies, and it's like the triumph of Bill Gates over Joe Montana or something.
Okay, what about Steph?
Steph is really cool. She's like the cool girl who's kind of like one of the guys. She can handle herself. I love that character, and I've brought a piece of that character, I think, to all of my female characters, and everything I've written, both before and since, was the kind of tough, self-sufficient, cool, smart girl who can do anything a guy can.
I love her line where she says, it's like I'm babysitting, but I'm not getting paid.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And then we get to Data.
Data's my boy. He's he combines both the sort of guileless enthusiasm of childhood of that age with all the geekiness that I had, all my love of science and tech, and I always did the science fairs in class, and and obviously I went into medicine and became a doctor because I love all that stuff, and stayed with science fiction my whole life. And he's the sort of the me at that age who finally, I don't know where he'll take it, but he'll end up somewhere in the tech world. In fact, I even just 2 weeks ago, I went to something called the Maker Faire in San Mateo, which is kind of the northern edge of Silicon Valley, with my son, my son Elliot, who's studying mechanical engineering at Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo. But the Maker's Faire is like a 7th grade science fair on steroids. There were like 20,000 people there, and it was everything from 3D printers to plasma cutters to soldering workshops to everything that Data would have loved.
Yeah, it's awesome, those things. I'm familiar with the Maker Fairs, and man, what a blast.
Yeah, they really are.
Data would go crazy there.
But he would. It's just right in his element.
Yeah, I would love to play with a 3D printer, so
Right.
I get it.
Yeah.
All right, so moving on to Sloth.
Sloth is like the ultimate outcast. He's kind of ugly and horrific, and you think he's scary at first, but he reminds me now, as I'm talking in retrospect, of the Frankenstein's monster character in Young Frankenstein. He's like this horrific monster, but when you get to know him, he's really a nice guy.
Right.
And it's kind of, there's a little piece of that in all of us, I think, that there's something about us we feel as monstrous and outcast, and I always suspected that one day my house would be surrounded by people with torches and pitchforks demanding that I get out of town. But deep down, I'm really a nice guy if you got to know me.
I love that you connected Sloth to Young Frankenstein. That is just awesome. We've got to definitely talk about the Fratellis. What about how you feel about them as a whole clan, if you will, rather than individuals?
Yeah, they were a great sort of group opponent, and wonderfully funny and heinous at the same time. Who was the actor? I'm blocking on his name now. It was
Joe Pantoliano.
Joe Pantoliano. Yeah. That's right. It was like an early role of his. So he was great. Mama Fratelli was a wonderful sort of Ma Barker character. I think there was
Anne Ramsey played her, and she was also the mama in Throw Mama from the Train. She was
That's right.
excellent in those.
I didn't realize it until right now, but you're absolutely right.
And don't forget Robert Davi for Jake.
Yeah, and he was great in that too.
They were all great. And there was a movie in the 70s, I think, about Ma Barker, which is the same kind of gang. And my sense was this was kind of a parody spin on that.
So did you do anything with the Fratelli characters in the book to take them a little deeper?
I mean, I amped up their over-the-topness a little bit, although they were pretty over-the-top as it was in the movie.
Oh, they were.
Yeah.
They were. Yeah, I love that scene where he's confessing his sins and the Fratellis are just into it.
Yeah, oh, totally. I know. That was great. Uh,
Now everything that whole scene, is that in the novelization also?
yeah, everything you saw in the movie is in the novelization. Plus, there
Okay.
are additional things in the novelization.
Okay.
And I always change dialogue where either I'm not crazy about the dialogue they use in the movie, or I'm able to amplify on it, or maybe make a single line that they have in the movie, kind of spread that out into a whole little, half page of dialogue back and forth to amplify it.
Okay. Well, we definitely covered the Goonies like I wanted to. This is definitely a dream come true. I appreciate this.
Great, good to hear it.
I have one more question.
Okay.
This has really been a pleasure. I mean, you've really answered everything I'd want. You love science fiction, obviously.
Absolutely.
Who would you name? Just give me 3 names of science fiction writers that you just say, yeah, everybody should be reading these.
Well, I grew up.
And they can be new or
basically-
old, so.
Yeah, I'm an old guy, remember. So I grew up on all the great 1950s sci-fi writers. So for me it was Arthur C. Clarke and Heinlein and Theodore Sturgeon. There was was it Sturgeon? I think it was a Sturgeon novel called The Moon is a Harsh Mistress that I reread about 10 years ago and was blown away by how prescient it was about computers and AI. It was about an early moon colony, and that's kind of overseen by a computer, and it kind of set the stage for everything that's come later, both in fiction and in fact, about the way we use computers now and the computers in sci-fi movies since then, from HAL to all the AI movies that you see now.
Very good. I'm actually a big Sturgeon fan myself. I just read, I was reading through one of his books of short stories, which is what he really had.
Yeah.
Case and Dreamer, and I can't get it out of my head.
Yeah.
What a wonderful writer. For me, it's him and Philip K. Dick and Harlan Ellison.
Oh, I love him.
Yeah, he's grumpy, but man, can he write.
He is grumpy.
But when you mentioned in the beginning, you mentioned like Amazing Stories and Tales from the Crypt. Totally attracted to that stuff, and these are the same guys that you can tell. That's all kind of the same universe. They write these really interesting, deep stories that even now are completely relevant.
Yeah,
and they're the basic for story. I mean, any good writer is going to read that and go, "Wow, I've got 20 ideas."
No, exactly. And now, not only the basis for story, but a lot of these guys were writing things that kids read when they were kids, who then grew up to be scientists and made these things happen in real life because they always wanted to see it happen really.
So you're talking specifically about the iPad, because that absolutely was a Star Trek thing, no question.
Yeah, absolutely. Not to mention 3D printing. I mean,
Yeah.
2 of the things that were 3D printed at the Maker Faire were pancakes and hamburgers.
You know what? There's at the Museum of Science and Industry in Chicago, they have a room of new science.
Yeah,
and
I grew up in Chicago. I love that museum.
Oh, great! That's where Dave and I both are based, in the suburbs.
Oh, great.
But in there, they have a whole thing about the food replicator and just the amazing things this can do. And they're still speculating. There's some progress, like you seeing the pancakes. It's like that's the first step to this happening. It's really amazing.
It is, yeah.
I don't know if we're going to get a cup to materialize with hot tea in it. I think we're a ways from that happening.
I think that's a 2-step process.
I think so, too. And if you've seen how fast a 3D printer is, that is the longest you're ever going to wait for a cup of tea.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. In fact, they 3D printed a car at the Maker Faire, which took quite a while.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow, fascinating.
Where in Chicago are you? Where in the suburbs?
Well, I'm actually out in Hoffman Estates, right by Schaumburg.
Oh, funny. I grew up in Des Plaines, actually.
Oh, get out.
Yeah.
I know Des Plaines, sure.
Yeah,
we're actually, if you know where Medieval Times is out here. Now, that wasn't there when I grew up here, but it's here now, and I could throw a rock and hit it. It's that close.
That's fun.
Well, maybe not that close, but pretty close.
Yeah, I'm about 20 miles northwest of that. I'm in Cary.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I spent ages, 7 through the end of high school in Des Plaines.
Wow. Now, do you ever? Well, yeah, I think I read you went to Maine West, right?
Maine West, right.
My wife grew up in Park Ridge. They all went to Maine South.
Oh, no kidding. Yeah. And Maine East. Harrison Ford went to Maine East.
Yes, he went to Maine East, of course. And so did Hillary Clinton, I believe.
That's right.
So, wow, we're hitting them all.
And so did Sharon Black.
No kidding. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
See, now you got me excited.
Small world.
Do you get out here? Do you make it out here ever?
Rarely. My folks, I went out and visited my folks when they were there, but they no longer are. There's a small possibility I'm going to my 50th high school reunion this fall, so we'll see.
Well, if you do, I want to invite you in. You know where Elgin is, right?
Sure.
Okay. In Elgin, every Saturday night, we do live podcasts. We do interviews, and it's just a lot of fun. It's at a Doctor Who cafe called the Blue Box Cafe.
Uh-huh.
So if you are in town, it would be an honor to have you come out and either get interviewed or just have a sandwich and sit and enjoy the show.
All right. Well, if I get out there, I'll give you a call.
Excellent. You just made my night. And I'll get my Return of the Jedi signed by you.
Okay, that's a deal.
And then Rob's got to plug the Blue Box. So outstanding.
Well, yeah. I mean, you know what? I would love for him to come out. I was just telling this story today. I actually sent an invite. I invited George Lucas out there because he lives in Chicago. And I did get a response back. And at first it was, he's considering it. And then it was, with episode 7, he's just coming out into public things is just not really in the cards right now. Right, it was like, wow, that's pretty cool. They were really on top of it. And I really got the impression that he did get the message. Wouldn't it be cool if he showed up? Wouldn't it be cool if you showed up with him? That would be incredible.
Sure. That'd be awesome.
So before I go, let me plug my stuff. Wrong Side Bob, as I mentioned, is the movie I'll be shooting, and I'm just starting to finance it now, so keep your ears open for that. You can see it on Facebook at Wrong Side Bob, or you can go to my Facebook page at That James Kahn. I'm sorry, my Twitter page at That James Kahn, my Twitter handle. And my website is thatjameskahn.com.
Yeah, and I really appreciate your time tonight, James.
Great. It's been a pleasure talking to you guys. Thanks a lot.
Thank you
very much, James.
Okay.
Right.
Bye-bye.
Have a good night.
Bye.
You too.
We hope you've enjoyed this show. This podcast is part of the 80s Reboot Overdrive channel on Southgate Media Group. You can follow us on Facebook on the 80s Reboot group page. We're also on Twitter and Tumblr at 80s Reboot. We invite you to check out all the wonderful podcasts and blogs available at southgatemediagroup.com. And thank you for reliving the 80s.